It's important that you have CS6 open. We'll be working on CS6 this year and not Photoshop Elements, and the reason we do that is because it's way better, and it's kind of industry standard. So if you ever do get into a job in design or something of the sort, Photoshop CS6 is something you will use in the job quite often. So it's kind of, it looks like most other Windows programs. You just go File, you go Open. You could have multiple tabs up here. I think our programs can handle up to about 100 photos before they start to crash. If you had a really good computer, you could do more than that. I just wanted to kind of do basic workflow today, and we'll keep sort of scaffolding it so you learn a new skill every time we do a demo. But I just want to show you the workflow that I go sort of basic adjustments when I start. Before I get into really artistic stuff, it's just sort of a basic workflow that just helps you get a better quality printed image. You'll notice that this box like pops up right away when you log in. That's the Nik filter collection. We're not going to get there right away. You can either X out of that or just minimize it for now. We'll be getting there probably next week. We'll look at Nik. It's awesome. The first thing I do right away, cameras are really smart, but they often don't expose quite properly. So the first thing I always do is a levels adjustment. So if you click, everything on here on the right are kind of like your basic adjustments. So we're just kind of playing in these tabs today, and I'm going to show you what they do. Later on, we'll get into all of these tabs and a little more here, and then into the filter collection. But the first one I actually do is a levels adjustment. So I would click on levels. It's a little bit slow. And the trick is here is you want to just trim up your whites and your blacks so that your blacks are perfectly exposed and your whites aren't terribly bright. So it's kind of a trick that you have to hold down the Alt key, and then you want to drag it. But watch what happens when I do. Can you see how it turns totally white? Tell me when you start to see a little bit of color appear. Do you see the little spots on my screen? Yeah, you want to drag it just till you see color. You want a little bit of a speckle pattern. I wouldn't go any more than that. You just want enough to see an outline, and that will trim up your dark end. And you're going to do the same thing on the right side. You're going to hold down the Alt key, and you're going to drag this till you see a little more color, and it's the other way. So now you're trimming up your light end. What you're doing is a really small adjustment, but it makes a big print quality difference because it really fixes the whites that are so white they turn blue, and the grays that aren't dark enough, the blacks that aren't dark enough, and they get a little bit of a gray hue. You can do general adjustments over here too. Once I've done my basic, then I can eyeball it and see if I want to play more. So if I wanted to make it brighter, I'm going to slide that. If I wanted to make it darker, I'm going to slide that. And what it does is it darkens, and highlights the highlights. And here, it just doesn't overall darken. So if I slide right, it goes way dark. Here, it goes left. But if you're not sure what your tone is like, just press that Alt key and drag it. And once you start to see the flex, that's when you've trimmed up the bright and the dark parts that are kind of hot spots. Anytime you want to get rid of a window, just click there. The next one, I never use the brightness and contrast in here because I think if you look at what it does, you lose a lot of picture image when you use it. So if you're playing with light and dark, I always do that in levels. Yeah, it's not a tight tool, I find. Like, it kind of dulls it. Yeah, it's kind of like using an auto fix, but it's not smart auto. Contrast gives you a little more clarity. If you go way contrast, you start to get really dark and really light. But I usually go between like 5 and 10 for contrast, just to give it a little bit of a sharper image, but without making it look super artificial. I would never click auto. I mean, you can, and then you can undo, but I just don't like the auto features. But if you wanted to undo, we'll start talking about keystrokes in Photoshop because they're actually the way that most photographers work. If you just press Control Z, as many times as I press that, it just keeps undoing the last thing I've done. Or you can just go Edit, Step Backward, and it'll keep working it. The next one here is curves, which is sort of a color balance, and you see some lights and darks come in. You can also change some preset colors here. I just sort of play around with this. I don't actually use it that much, but if you set it to red, then it sort of adjusts your reds. I find curves, I kind of think like I'm taking a guess on curves sometimes, so I like other tools a little bit better. But remember, if you don't like it, just step backward or Control Z. Exposure I like quite a lot. I don't like using the top key because when you look at what it does, it's sort of, again, you really lose that image clarity, or it makes it too dark. It kind of compensates for your camera, but what I really like is the gamma correction, and I use this quite a bit. For most sort of landscape shots, I crank this up just a little bit. It gets me a nicer sort of value tone. Or if I'm doing portraits and I want like a softer kind of look, I often bring that down. But you sort of see it does give it a bit of a film, kind of like a grayness. But it does really nice work with portraiture when you're using gamma correction. Offset, my mouse is weird. Again, really loses image quality or gets super dark. So I don't actually play with offset that much. Vibrance I like a lot because it increases saturation without making it look like really stupid. So if I did saturation here, all of a sudden you lose some of your natural colors. But if I did vibrance, it just makes those hues a little bit deeper and a little bit darker without it going super synthetic like crazy. I use vibrance all the time when I'm doing basic landscape sort of stuff. Hue saturation. Hue just changes the tonal contrast so you can kind of see the colors change. I didn't pick the best of photos. I'm just going to see if maybe I could pick a photo with more color. Okay, we'll use this one. In hue or saturation, hue changes everything. You can see it gets quite unnatural, but it changes sort of the color balance. Saturation is just how vivid it is, but then you get into like hyper vivid where you're not even sure what it is. And if you desaturate completely, you end up in black and white. Lightness, again, I don't like the lightness tool here because I think it changes sort of the layout of the photo, but I do my brights and darks in levels. Color balance, you can change if you balance out the shadows or the midtones, which is like your overall photo, or your highlights, which is just the brights. So let's say midtones, I can give it more green. So it's going to do a green hue to everything. Whereas if I just change the highlights, it's just going to turn the brighter stuff a little more greener and give you not sort of an overall image. Really nice to sort of play. Sometimes like when I'm doing a sunset, like I want my highlights to have more color, but I don't need the mountains to turn blue, but I just want to saturate certain parts. So it colors out, it balances the light, dark, and medium sort of tones. Oh, we were just there. Black and white, exactly what it says, but even within black and white, you'll see there's tones of black and white, and you don't see a great big difference, but it does give you sort of a little more flavor to your black and white. I wouldn't spend too much time here because once you start playing in Nik Collection next week, they have something called Silver Effects, and it does black and white way, way better than this does. Photo filter just gives you kind of a filter like you would on Instagram or on your effects on your thing, on your phone. Cooling is going to make it a little more blue, a little more purple. You can give it a red wash. You're just really giving it a wash. So you're changing every single thing in the photo, but not super dramatically. Unless I want to make it like super dramatic, then I would just crank up my density. Again, if I don't like that, let's say I don't like my last look, you can just Control Z till it's gone. Next is Channel Mixer, which again isolates the colors a little bit, so I could make it way more blue, or I could take out the blue entirely. So it's just ways to sort of play with it. This doesn't really do your highlights, but it sort of lets you pick within the three major colors. Color lookup, I don't want to get there yet because I don't think we're quite there yet. Invert does exactly what it says. It gives you that kind of like hospital MRI kind of look. Posterize, super simple kind of cartoon effect. Kind of cool in that shot. Threshold will make it kind of like an old ink cartoon or something, like a sort of animated cartoon. I could also do, this is going to be really hard to do. I'm just going to pick a different color now that I've done that. So weird. The other one is selective color, so I can then just, you hardly see it, but you can kind of see a tonal difference. But you can change what's in the cyans. You can just make it a little stronger or a little darker. Gradient map is going to turn you, you've got some options here from really weird to really quite simple black and white. But these are all sort of presets, so I would consider the ones on the bottom are kind of like an Instagram filter that makes it look pretty cool. So what I thought people would do is, I went through that pretty fast, but there's actually a lot here if you play with it. And just so you start noticing, can everybody kind of see all of the stuff here on the right? Those are, every time you make an adjustment, Photoshop saves it as a layer. And we'll get more and more into layers, but basically if I didn't like this one, I could then delete that one and go back. So it keeps track of every action that you make, and then it can take you back to the original. So start paying attention when you do stuff that it's coming into layers. You can also change like the opacity within a layer here too, but we'll get more into layers later. I just really wanted people to sort of play around in this area today. I mean, you can play around over here more, but we'll get a little further into it. But this gives you a basic adjustment start. Does that sort of give us a starting place to go off of, Mr. Enai?
Yes, I think so. That's lots to play with.
Awesome. Just remember to hold down the Alt key when you're doing levels or you won't get the kind of effects. And I'm wondering, maybe if we leave the video conferencing stuff up, if your kids have any questions, we can just mute it and then you can fire a question if you need to.
Sure. That sounds good.
Okay, sounds good. Happy playing. It would be awesome if you guys edit some. Oh, the only other thing that I wanted people to do while they're saving, sorry, forgot that. When you're saving it, hugely important if you want to use it again, always click Save As. It's going to give you a default as a Photoshop file. If you save it as a Photoshop, what it does is it preserves the integrity of the layers so you can still re-edit it. If you save it as a JPEG, you are then done, and then you can post it. So like you couldn't post a Photoshop file to the Google community, or you couldn't post it to Facebook. So you have to change it to a JPEG to post, unless like it's a large project that you're working on for a long time. Until you're done, I would always save it as a Photoshop, and then when you're committed, save it as a JPEG. And that's it, so I'll let you guys sort of play for a bit. I'll leave the connection up if you guys have any questions, and we'll just throw you guys up on mute.
Cool. Sounds great. We're playing.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
I also, for you guys, there's a professor from UVic who would like to sort of look in on our class today. So at 9:30, we're going to have sort of a blue jean session with her. You can keep working, but she kind of just wants to check it out. What? She's interested. Let's try to scale people to UVic. That either will. Doing a study. One box is the technical one. I think that's one box here. Because you lost this here. Hopefully she doesn't do a presentation. Or not. I'll look it up on my phone. I can use that.
I can just put this in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because this one doesn't have a...
Okay, awesome. Yeah, question.
Like a certain area. But one is like specific.
Yeah. So you're going to go here. What area do you need? So I press Control plus. Okay. There's actually two ways you can do it. So you can do it this way and highlight just the eye each time. And then if you didn't like that, you go to here.
Oh my god. Okay, it first landed in a motion lot. Getting the prize right now. No, that one's over here. Which shows that Kaylee I will intro help.
Upload if you guys have got good stuff.
It's
It's just going to take a
like
second.
I love kayak games. I love Tucson.
So basically this is what you do is you can do any of these changes on the sides, but then just click your brush.
There's like a whole bunch of
So like unclick, you know, like the effect here.
and there are people in
So say with any of those and then click brush instead of paint.
Montreal and microphone.
Let's see if you have any others. Upload a few at a time.
With color?
Sorry? What's in that? Hello. I'll probably make the world a difference. And if you guys want to post a few, how many people felt comfortable with ISO yesterday? Yeah, one person? Or nobody's just listening to me?
I said yes.
Yes? Well, I know you know. Okay. How many people need a little more understanding about ISO? Nobody needs anything. Okay, I don't know what to do with that.